And so to just start, if everyone, I know that there's quite a few people on the call, if everyone doesn't mind putting their name and title and organization within the chat box, that would really help us with our notes and being able to track correspondences. But to just get started, I know this is probably really is old news by this point, but I will go over just very briefly, just so we're all on the same page of where everything is, just a few updates on the Volkswagen Settlement. And so basically, with this, the current funding that's open, the Volkswagen Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure charges pays for level 2 charging equipment. There's $10.4 million that was originally available for reimbursements up to $2,500 per installation. As a reminder, we did get some feedback that they are accepting up to 10 applications or 10 sites per application, and you could redo those applications once a quarter. And so 70% for publicly available, 60% for workplace or multi-unit dwelling. It is first come, first serve. We have been getting word about that DC fast charging. We don't know when that's going to drop. We've been told spring. A few months ago, we were told maybe by the beginning of the year, but obviously that didn't happen. And so we haven't heard anything where it's like expected to drop soon, but within the next few months, definitely going to be opening that one. So just keep your eyes out, but we will definitely let you know if we hear anything about anticipating release date on that. And then for those of you that didn't follow this, the alternative fuel infrastructure tax credit, which is a tax credit equal to 30% of cost of EVSE not exceeding $30,000. Originally, the deadline was December 31st, 2020. This was extended to 2021 through that the stimulus package that was just passed a few weeks ago. And so you can double dip with these if you are private and you have property tax. And so just keep that in mind that you are able to double dip with those. And then as an update, just how much we have seen people applying for the tax vamp, that's what we call the Volkswagen emission. Of the 10.4 million, a very small amount has actually been requested thus far. Only about 362,000 has been requested thus far. Nothing has been awarded yet. So we're curious to see when that will.
This is
Fun. Hi.
So just a quick update. The city of Dallas did receive an awards letter just yesterday. So I imagine the awards are starting to trickle out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. This is Andy with Texas Parks and Wildlife, and we also received our award this week.
Awesome. That's great. Yay. Hopefully good news. So yeah, that's amazing, which is even more pertinent in trying to get people to put in their applications now because money is going to be starting to flow out. And so with this, you can see we've done a geographic distribution. So this is up to date from December 21st, 2020. They don't update the list of applicants every week or every day. It's pretty much, we've noticed, on a monthly basis. And so we collect it as soon as we see that it's updated and take there's two different PDFs that they update. They do like people who have applied and then like where and what they've applied for. And so we consolidate those and do geographic distributions so we can get a better idea of who and what is being applied for. And so thus far, you can see on the right, that little donut is the geographic. And so you can see Dallas-Fort Worth is around 23%. And then the other section, so these you can note, it might look a little random. It's like, what is Bell, Beaumont, Port Arthur? These are the priority areas listed within the mitigation plan by the TCEQ. And so that's how we're tracking those, because those were pulled out specifically as listed as priority areas. And so other is anything outside of the listed priority areas that they identified. And then below, you can see the infrastructure distribution to date. This is not by applicant amount of information. It's about total amount requested. And so 50% of the funds have been requested for multi-unit dwellings, 12% of the funds have been requested for workplace, and 38% have been requested for public place. And so we'll continue to update these. If anyone tracks any of the COG STEC, our Surface Transportation Technical Committee. We have meetings every month, or our RTC, our Regional Transportation Council. We've been submitting these as part of the packet that you can see as part of their items that you can open. So if you ever want an updated or latest version of that, definitely feel free to go. You can email us and we'd be happy to send it to you, or you can go and see on either the STEC or RTC websites and kind of pull that information, and we have that. But that was just a quick breakdown of that. And so with that, then we also just kind of wanted to go over very quickly from last call to this call. If everyone had the chance to kind of go over our follow-ups, I attached that to the meeting invite with some follow-ups. But basically last time we went over a lot of just different RFPs. We had City of Irving as well as DFW Airport talk through kind of their experiences and what they've done. City of Irving was willing to share their RFP as a sample for people to be able to look at and just kind of use that as a starting point. So we really appreciate that. And then just other notable points that we went over that people were saying, like leasing can be cost prohibitive, just other points. And so is anyone wanting to continue conversations on any points, or you feel like we didn't clarify any questions from last time that we can continue, or would you guys want to drop into some new conversations about different topics? And this is a peer-to-peer roundtable thing. We're just trying to facilitate stuff. So definitely don't be shy to talk. We're the people that don't actually install anything. So we definitely want the perspective from all of you guys.
Hi, Bailey. This is Far again from the City of Dallas.
Hey.
I guess there was some email correspondence from James earlier that talked a bit about upcoming building codes. I think that would be interesting to explore if that could help us in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And that was great. James, we really appreciate you sending that. That was actually already on my list of things and topics that I wanted to bring up today. So that was well aligned. Anyone else have any other topics they want to try to cover, or any priority questions they want to try to cover so we can make sure we're managing our time correctly?
Bailey, this is Mindy. I just wanted to bring up to the group the couple of things that I had emailed you about the map, and another idea that I had about the Volkswagen grant.
Yeah, that'd be totally fine. You can go ahead and do that now.
Okay. One of the things that I was very curious about for the Metroplex, I know we've talked to Irving and DFW and some of the other municipalities that either have already installed their own charging stations or in the process of doing it at various stages. One of the things that I would be very curious to see, and I think it could be helpful for some of us that are earlier in the process, I'd love to see a map that shows which cities have charging stations and service agreements with which providers, like who has ChargePoint and so on. I think that would be useful to guide some of our conversations. And I also was curious if anyone in the group has worked with like your economic development teams or someone else in the city to put together like a one-pager or something like that to promote the Volkswagen grant to some of your private industries or multifamilies, anything like that, to kind of help get the word out on how they could install their own infrastructure and get the rebate.
Yeah, so Mindy, just jumping up on that, we actually did develop, this is one of the points I wanted to bring up as well in a minute. We've worked with a smaller subset kind of this stakeholder group and have been developing some multifamily resources for this exact thing. So we do have a website. It's dfwcleancities.org/multifamily, and we produced a flyer that people can distribute. It's free, it's downloadable, you can upload it on your website, you can print it and send it to people, but it focuses mainly on the benefits of multifamily and the exact breakdown of how they can utilize this grant. And so we definitely do encourage everyone to take advantage of that free resource. While it's only a flyer or a website with some information, we're hoping that you guys can kind of like shepherd that into the right hands. And so with that, just from the city perspective, from a smaller granular perspective, you could identify properties, identify avenues in distribution, and then try to get that word out there. If anyone has any questions or issues with that, definitely feel free to ping them back to us. We're not saying that you guys have to take any burden on trying to make that happen. We have a presentation set up where we're happy to do presentations to smaller groups, 5-minute quick presentation, or we can give presentations to larger groups. FAR has been coordinating with the Apartment Association of Greater Dallas, where we will be coordinating a presentation for them, which covers 11 counties, which is really great. So hoping that that's a really good jumping off point for getting multifamily kind of expanded. And then from the other point that Mindy just brought up, do you guys have any sort of concerns or questions about trying to get that kind of matrix of existing EVSE and providers together? Does anyone have any kind of questions about sharing who their provider is or making a available list as such? Or do you guys think that's a good idea, or you guys would want to do that?
Hi, Bailey. I do think that could be helpful. I mean, at some point now that we've received the grant, we'll have to do a competitive process for the infrastructure, and just making sure that we send the solicitations to the right organization would be great. And if there was like one concise list, that would help.
Perfect. Okay, so we can try to facilitate that and get something like that together. And obviously, if people are have concerns over not wanting their information or who their provider is listed or shared, they can definitely let us know, and we could kind of hold that in. But going back again to circling back to the point that was just brought up by FAR, EV ready building codes. Just as an update, I know in the last call, it's been a little confusing throughout the fall. I had said that the International Energy Conservation Codes passed the EV ready codes within their 2021 codes for their conservation building codes. That was actually false. In late October, their board of directors voted to overturn that voted approval. They stated that it didn't align with their reducing energy mindset. And so that is why they removed it from this version of the codes. However, the proposed codes from the organization that proposed it are available online. They are set with different background of why they think it's important, what they believe should have been included, and what was voted on. And so from what I've read online, it has been a little bit contentious because it was voted from different stakeholders as something that they wanted to include. And so when the Board of Appeals kind of pulled it at the end, it was kind of shocking for many groups. However, you can't really access the codes until you purchase them. And so our office just was able to procure the 2021 codes just within the last 2 weeks. And like if anyone read James's email earlier, we have a regional codes committee that is housed within our environment and development department. They essentially go through and they try to streamline codes for smaller municipalities across our region and try to create a regional, this is what we vote as the region as what we want our code to be. Obviously, different local governments can change it and adjust based upon what their particular directives are. However, this is just the easiest way of like, okay, we've gone through all this process of all these different stakeholders. We voted on why we think this is working for our region, and they push that through. And so then a local government can just be like, okay, we're accepting this because we know it's kind of already been vetted by our peers and the COG. And so with that, typically they go through the new codes kind of section by section where they're able to say, yes, we like this, or we're going to strike that and make a regional amendment. However, because we do not have the EV readiness within the codes now at all, we would have to basically create a proposal from our side to try to get that included as a regional amendment in addition to the codes itself. And so that is something that we think is very important. But I do think it'd be interesting to get y'all's perspective, because that would essentially create potentially more work for you guys from the city's perspective, because it would have a requirement of new commercial construction or new multifamily construction to have EV readiness built in. And so how would you bring that into permitting? How would you bring that into all your kind of construction and contractor work? And so if you guys want to kind of open up that discussion of any concerns you would have with that, or what you think would be the benefits of kind of passing an EV ready code for the region, and kind of how you envision that going.
Well, this is Scott Deathridge. I'm a private citizen, but involved in a private company launching soon in Southern California. And one of the things they've done in California is try to figure out, well, how do we make applying for and getting building permits for EV chargers on private property faster and easier. One of the bills passed the state legislature allows EV spots where you charge an EV to count for local parking requirements, which I think would be good, just to make sure that if you need 100 parking spots and you have 20 charger spots, you don't now have to have 120. You just need 100, which seems pretty simple, but that may be something to consider as a kind of a model EV permitting building code that you might want to consider. The other one is just an expedited process. When you go to the city for a permit, you kind of get a little bit of an express lane. I don't know how it is in North Texas, but in California, sometimes it takes 9 months just to get a building permit. So maybe it's worse out there and not a problem here, but those are just a couple of things. And I certainly would, if the group's interested, I would certainly be willing to gather from the private side what may make getting private companies to put chargers on private property and build charging stations. You know, things that may make it a little easier if that's of interest, and it may not be, but just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's great points. Streamlined permitting is one of the biggest points that we're always kind of discussing, and it's something that we don't have a good grasp on at this point, to be very honest. City by cities vary, and so that in the Dallas-Fort Worth region, while it's amazing, it is very difficult because there are so many local governments and everyone does things differently. And so trying to create a streamlined process, especially for EV infrastructure, and not having to try to figure out, okay, I'm in Grapevine versus I'm in Fort Worth. What do I do? How does it differ with permitting? How long is it going to take? Is that going to deter companies from trying to deploy more chargers? And so from the side, I know right now we've been focusing conversations on cities themselves applying and trying to get funding to install stations on their own. How much do you guys want to prioritize kind of reshifting that focus and more so doing that kind of private partnership that Scott was just kind of bringing up, where you guys wouldn't take the burden, you would try to create like community partners and have the private sector put out this capital and run this stuff, while the city, because it's within your jurisdiction, would be benefiting from that. Does anyone have any good examples or kind of good ways that you guys have tried to kind of facilitate those partnerships to try to get the private sector to try to kind of expand this effort without you guys having to put out any money?
I don't really have a good example of that scenario. I'm still processing the fact that it won't be in the recommended codes. That was one of the actual actions in our CCAP plan, was to, adopt that part of the new building codes. And I'm at a loss. I'm like, where does this leave us, and how far is this kicked down the road before we can explore that option again? Or what other opportunities do we have to get it into code?
Yeah, we were very disappointed that it was pulled. It's something that we are constantly trying to discuss within that energy side, where EVs aren't going to be this, oh, you're adding energy, people are charging, you're adding electricity, and so people are going to shy away from that. And that kind of went along with that exact type of mindset, is like, oh, EV charging, it's not conserving energy. Well, it's like, well, it's a shift in the whole energy economy. And so that is something that we have to kind of get around, but we can use it as an opportunity, honestly. If it was adopted into the International Energy Conservation Code, they're doing that from an international perspective on what they think could work for the majority of people. But this does give us a better opportunity where we could kind of look into it, do a little bit more research, and figure out what works best for DFW. And so it is something that could potentially be a benefit, depending on how involved and expressive people are with their needs and what they want and what they think we can achieve with that. They can be as aggressive or conservative as we think we have to be, without having to align with just whatever was passed within the international codes.
Hey, Bailey, it's Melissa with the City of Irving. Good morning. Thank you for all you're doing with organizing all of this. On the private partnership side, I definitely think there could be a benefit with us exploring whether or not it's a separate meeting and almost type of workshop or symposium where you're bringing in a lot of the private sector that could help with that. The reason I say that is because we're looking at trying to get some of that Volkswagen money for a potential fast charger. So we've already been talking to our REP, and they do have different consultants and different partners that they have on the private side that have a lot of innovative technology as it relates to whether or not it be battery operated, or so it's not completely sucking off of our system. And so when we're talking about making sure that it's something where it's not just putting more energy back on, I think there are some innovative solutions, and I bet you if that's one of them that they have, that the private sector is probably either working on or already has other options. So for us as local governments, if we can, have y'all be the conduit in order to get those private companies on board, it just reminds me of the beginning days of high-speed rail, and how many things have changed in that area. So I feel like this could be the same thing where the private sector could really be pushing us forward if we start, having that type of relationship.
Yeah.
I also think, this is Mindy with Louisville, I'm sorry. I feel like that there's some value to looping our economic development folks in as well, because they could include this sort of proposal in some of the negotiations that they're doing, or potential agreements that they may have that would be mutually beneficial both for the city and for the applicant.
Oh, definitely. And that's something that we are constantly trying to push. And that's the way that you are trying to get that message across to these people that might not necessarily know the EV world very well. From the economic development perspective, this is a way to get people at their location, at their site. If you're going through town and you need a charge, you're looking up, and if you're going to a random restaurant that has this, you're probably going to go in there, that restaurant, and utilize that space in the restaurant because there was a charger that you might not necessarily have ever stopped at. And so using that as that economic development perspective and trying to get their insight from a city perspective is really important. That is something that we constantly are trying to also push, is the silo busting of different departments within your own municipality, and making sure all the different people that need to be involved are involved. And so you guys have more sustainability people, you have finance people, you have the economic development, community development people, making sure all those people are getting in on the conversations can really allow for that solution to be best for the city itself and get the buy-off. But going off of that, the site locations, DC fast charging and all of that really has to do with utility coordination early on. And so I'd reached out to Randy. I see you're on the phone, not to call you out right now, but a few days ago. If you just
I'll let you go to that next topic, but I have two things to say on the before we close the last topic.
Of course, yeah.
Recognize that on code, just putting recommendations or considerations in the code, you know, as part of a checklist, even if you don't require the performance, getting people to think about it can get you a step closer. I did just post in the chat what I think is one of the best references to existing municipal code. And even though it's written by I think it's the Great Plains Institute or somebody else, it's a good summary of what a lot of different cities have done.
That's great.
The other thing is going back to Far's question. What was that question on? What was the topic just before this one? I'm sorry, I haven't had enough coffee yet.
Far, do you remember what question?
The maps. The who are the service providers?
Mm-hmm.
Recognize now, NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, part of DOE, maintains a map of where they know chargers are. And for example, the map that Encore uses of EV chargers on its website is based on an API that we pull that data in. In that data, and I just looked at what we've got on encore.com/EV, the first 30 sites that I looked at all have the service provider. I believe.
Thank you for calling today. Visit plano.gov to explore city services.
I believe if you go out to the NREL website, as opposed to our website, you can actually download that file as a CSV or Excel export, which would give you then, and like I said, I think the first 20, 30 of them that I looked at, every one of them had its service provider listed.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. We'll have to look into that. I haven't seen that. But Randy, while you have your video on, do you just kind of want to give a breakdown of kind of some of the questions I posed to you in email if you saw that a few days ago, just from the utility perspective, what are the different types of data and information that you guys encourage people to gather before they are reaching out to utilities, and what's kind of like the best site considerations and biggest implications that could happen based upon different sites that you guys kind of communicate from the utilities perspective?
Yep. One thing, and I don't know that you've met him directly, but I know that he's been involved in a number of activities. He's coordinated with Everman, which you folks are also involved in, et cetera. Eric Daniels from our team is on the phone today, and Eric was just designated a couple months back as the guy. So if you've got a fleet or you're a municipality, commercial, industrial, approaches for EVSE service requests, and that could be as a modification of an existing service, that could be a serve new request, you know, someday like the Everman one, et cetera. Those will also be interconnect requests if it's bi-directional. That's another whole beast, and Eric can help coordinate that. But Eric's been named the guy for anybody to go to, and he's on the phone today. We did discuss your questions. Eric, with that, you want to start poking on this?
Yeah. Good morning, Bailey. Good morning, all. Thank you, Randy. I need to update my email signature. The guy. So really, the first question, you know, the top items, these data points that Encore is looking for, it's really not that different from the municipalities who are on the phone. Anytime you would have a new service request, whether it be, you know, a pumping station for water districts or for a new municipality building, you know, it's really about that, the who, what, when, where, why. You know, who are you? What type of charging are you looking at doing? What type of equipment? What type of vehicles? What type of behavioral charging are you going to do? Where obviously is a very big part, right? Where are you going to be doing the charging? And then the when, so the timeline of implementation as well. I mean, I did say this in the what part of it, but the expected time use. So those are really the big items, but we would encourage you to reach out as early as possible. You know, Encore is dedicated, you know, to serving those and keeping the lights on and turning new lights on as much as possible, right? With this emerging technology, you know, this is a learning process for us all, and so the sooner we can get a request in and we can be a part of the conversation, we feel that's going to be a benefit to everybody on the system.
Eric,
especially
if I
the
can.
new request.
Eric,
Hello?
Yeah, this is Randy again. Excuse me. Although the who, what, where, and when sounds pretty straightforward, you know, Encore as a utility can't really consult and engineer your solution. So embedded in those what's and whens are the requester having thought through, are they going to do this in phases over multiple years, and what's the end goal? It's going to require that the user think about, well, am I going to do managed charging, and what is my mix of level 2 versus DC fast charge? So again, you know, coming to us with as much of that information as possible, you know, obviously if we can do something once, it's going to cost, frankly, if it costs us less is not the issue. It's what's going to happen on your side if you have to, you know, keep plowing through concrete or run additional conduit or do other things. Typically, for us to get it to the site, it helps to know what the end state is going to be and not touch it a number of times, and it can have some implications, but certainly behind the meter for your siting, it does as well. So we can help to some extent. We just can't engineer the whole solution. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Randy. And that is a careful balance, you know, that what Encore's role is, right? What the state has tasked us with, and so that the consulting term, you know, we absolutely can consult on your site and your plans, but there is a limit to that. I guess that's really getting to the weeds a little bit. I don't want to really drown everybody with that, but so just the biggest factors that can impact the cost of an implementation is really, it's difficult for everyone to understand, you know, what the tariff is. You know, that's our menu, right? That's our prices and what we can do and where we're regulated. And so understanding what Encore's role is, educating the customer, educating really, you know, anybody who wants to listen on what Encore's role is and what we're here to do in a deregulated market. And then as far as the recommendations on the siting, you know, that really does take a couple pieces of information for us to know what Randy was the points he was talking to about, you know, what are those end goals? And, you know, I don't know is an okay answer. I mean, please don't let that be a reason someone wouldn't reach out to us. But you know, that's where myself and a group of our designers can come out and do a site visit and talk through what Encore's facilities look like in the area, and what some possibilities of us serving you would look like. So, and another question is really that how far in advance? So a very high level timeline looks like if your load is at about a 1.5 megawatts, that's 1,500 kVA. That's roughly what a Walmart supercenter looks like as far as power. That's about a 6-month timeline of planning, design, and construction. And for every megawatt you were to add, at a high level, we could add a month to that timeline. So that can step linearly moving out. That's a very good rule of thumb to look at a timeline of inception to construction complete to being energized. Bailey, did that address
Yeah.
some of those topics? I don't want to keep. I don't
No.
want to keep.
Well, Eric, before you scare everybody completely, though, move down below the 1.5 megawatts. You know, that's if you've got like a fleet or a whole yard, or you're going to be installing like a Tesla charging station with 8 DCFCs or something like that. A lot of the installation requests are going to be somewhere in between the size of your home and a typical municipality fleet area where maybe only 5 or 10 vehicles are being energized, and could all be level 2, in which case we're talking double-digit amps, not megawatt, et cetera, charging.
That is correct. It is as a lot of especially the municipalities, it is a very busy time in North Texas as well as the whole state, and so that 6-month mark, while that's not meant, definitely don't want to scare you. That's just a real good high-level rule of thumb. There is quite a queue of new service requests as far as new businesses coming to Texas and residents moving in. So yes, absolutely. Inception to construction complete can happen sooner than that, but just at a high level, that 6-month mark is a very good a rule of thumb on the timeline. But they're so.
Yeah. One follow-up question. Like, let's say these codes go through, that we take a regional amendment and we adopt, and a bunch of municipalities adopt a EV readiness code. How would that impact you guys, and how would that impact the stakeholder themselves and the customer themselves through the city, if all of a sudden this kind of influx of EV readiness and EV chargers would come about just because it is a mandated code ordinance now? So let's say like 15% of all spaces within all new commercial and multifamily need to be EV ready. How does that impact y'all at this point? And then how does that impact the coordination efforts? And does it make the coordination efforts easier from the city's perspective if there is EV readiness already there? And how does that work?
So that's a great question, Bailey. So that's where getting in early really does help. So what Encore's role really is, and how we're regulated at the state level is, we just can't build facilities to be in waiting for that customer. We really have to have a signed agreement with a customer to build facilities, and that's how the state regulates it, and that's how we keep our rates low, right? We don't have just empty capacity. We don't have capacity just waiting around for a customer. We really have to forecast and plan this out with conversations to the customer. We can forecast out and try to understand that as best as possible. But so to that point about those city plans and those policies about about parking spaces needed and charging being available. You know, as soon as those are put in place, whether it be for multifamily or commercial, you know, I'm not trying to get myself tangled up here too much, but, you know, just because that is the policy, doesn't mean that the demand is there with the customer as well as the vehicle. And so just being able to add that to our planning items will help us ultimately meet that demand when it is there. Did that answer the question, Bailey?
Yeah.
Well, although I'm going to add two pieces of it. This is Randy, and boy, I'm trying to bite my tongue. I'm sorry, Eric.
You're fine, Randy.
If you were platting a new multifamily or a commercial strip center or whatever, you know, you're going to go to the utility and say, here's the service that I need. It doesn't change the timeline for us any longer if that item includes, you know, oh, by the way, you know, we needed three-phase power over here and we need that over there, and we want 2 different meters and whatever. If on that flop of the requirements to us, it says, oh, and by the way, we're going to have, you know, 12 EV charging stations over here. And so that contributes to the total load. They're going to be, you know, if it's DC fast charge, maybe it's 483 phase as opposed to 242 phase, and whatever those requirements are, that they have electric stations in them does not make our response any longer. That's part of, again, like I was saying, you have to be ready with those 4 W's to tell us enough about what's going to be in there, and then we just go at it. Putting a piece on the way that Eric described our regulated requirements. Again, we can't build before a customer asks us for, you know, a siting. And it's a first in, first out queue. That's why we stress, you know, get engaged as soon as possible. We cannot choose to service somebody's requirement because it's more urgent for you or whatever. It's just the way we have to work. So getting those requirements in, starting the entire serve new process. The other thing I wanted to underscore is going back one step earlier, this issue of, yes, we're not going to say that it's anything less than 6 months, although it could be. Recognize that some installations don't even involve Encore. You know, if you're installing a charger at your home, and your first call can be to your electrician, and they can tell you, you know, or you, if you know enough, you go look at your service box, your bus box, and say, oh, I could put another 30 amp, 50 amp, whatever circuit on there and still be underneath the rating. So it's just an issue of clicking another breaker in there and a wire off to the side with whatever sort of plug. That's not an Encore action. Well, obviously, if you're at the vehicle yard, you know, behind a city service building, you have electrical service already. Knowing, you know, your electrician or your engineers are going to know how much service you have before you've got to pick up the phone and say, hey, Encore, I need to change my service. So it may be that, you know, you're still 10 or 20 chargers away from actually engaging Encore in that conversation. And don't quote me on the 10 or 20. I mean, if it's an industrial site, it could be 12 DC fast chargers, or you could already have done right up to the edge and just calling for 1 level 2 puts you in Encore phone call territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would just reiterate to everyone, especially with this upcoming DC fast charging funding opportunity that's going to drop soon. If you guys are anticipating wanting to take advantage of that, definitely I would reach out to Encore now, discuss that. Those are the heavier load of stations. And so getting that in conversation now would be very important. But does anyone else have any questions from utility coordination or kind of siting that you want to kind of throw at Encore when they're on the line? And if you think of something later, you can definitely reach out to us. We understand also Encore isn't the only utility within our region. There's many. And so we have tried to create a kind of contact list of different utilities and looking at that. So if you're unsure of a contact of who to reach out to, you can definitely contact us and we could try to get someone in their offices to try to get that conversation going. Because while this is going to be consistent for any utility, it's going to be the same issues, the same forecasting stuff that they're talking about. But going off of that, this week it was interesting. I was in a meeting that was covering street light Eevee charging stations, and they were going through LA. And so I'm curious to see, I know streetlights, we've had conversations with people over the years, and it's kind of all over the place on who owns streetlights. Do people even know who owns streetlights within their jurisdiction? That varied. And so going off of that, LA basically, when they did their LED transition on their streetlights, it reduced the energy load on their streetlights enough where they were able to implement a charging network of EV charging stations on their streetlights to allow for EV street parking through private chargers. And so getting that conversation going, we thought it was really interesting because it doesn't require the trenching that other stations would require. They did mention that there was more streamlined, easier permitting processes with it. It's a little less expensive stations. And so for those of you in cities, do you guys know who owns streetlights? Do you guys have the LED streetlights? Like, I want to kind of get that conversation going because that's definitely is an interesting kind of direction that we think we would love to discuss with DFW.
McKinney, Texas. Yeah, we have all our streetlights marked, GPS, GIS, all the relevant information, whether it's maintained. In our case, we've got Grayson Collin Electric Co-op, we've got TXU, we've got CoServe, and we've got Encore, of course. But each one's marked off, and the city has 1,000 lights that they maintain as well. So we have all that information for the record.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, if that's something that you guys would be interested in discussing further, we would love to give more details on that because it really is from a street parking perspective. Obviously, you're not going to do every street light in little residential neighborhoods, but for a downtown area where you guys have street parking, metered parking, allowing for that infrastructure to be implemented and installed without adding extra bulk and extra equipment onto sidewalks is a really easy way to allow for EV charging within those corridors that don't have as much spacing allowed. So for people that are interested in that, definitely reach out to us. We'd love that conversation more.
Bailey,
Yeah.
this is Tom Anthony with Encore. I'll just say that from that perspective, from an Encore's perspective, anywhere in our footprint, we own all the street lights except for Arlington and Fort Worth.
Okay, good to know. So it might be a conversation more so with you guys. So Zoe just put a question out on the chat. Is there conversation yet within Encore about providing some sort of rebate or incentive program for solar-powered EV stations over conventional or chargers that are grid interactive to reduce peak demand usage or battery storage?
Well, I guess I'll chime in because it'll save me typing the second half of my chat response. Bailey, you mentioned earlier the difficulties you're running into because EV charging is an addition. So, we've made arguments, Encore has energy efficiency funding. And so, for example, the rebates on solar installation really do reduce an existing load. The installation of EV increases the overall load. And so it's possible, we ran into that with just the rebates on the chargers and I'm not sure who was it. Zoe was the one who asked. It is possible that we could, just like if it's Energy Star rated, maybe if we can actually show that there's a reduction, which obviously co-installation with solar, use of battery systems, things like that do make them more efficient. But then again, if it's a new load, it's kind of viewed as an addition. there's another side of this that is the demand charge management that I mentioned earlier. And that's the reason that you would install with a battery, because depending on what tariff you pay your fees to your retailer under, it's going to have various classes of demand charge overages types of things. And that's certainly, especially with spiky DC fast chargers, et cetera, something you can do to really manage the cost of your electricity service. I'll take an action to see where we were in terms of energy efficiency for, again, a more efficient type of charging system. That's really a little bit different almost than the class of question that address demand response. So in other words, the ones where we could actually signal, oh, by the way, we're under, and we have demand response systems already that we do provide commercial and industrial funding for, that, in the case of an ERCOT, what's it called, EEA, emergency energy action, we will make a call and say, okay, all you people who have signed up, now's the time, scale back your consumption, and you get funding for that. There's both an ERCOT program for that and an Encore program for that. Those types of chargers that could take, and the OCCP protocol does already support that in a number of chargers, where you could say, fine, I'm a level 2 charger, I just was charging at 12 kW, I'm going to max at 4 right now, or something like that. Those can be automated types of signals. So again, I will look into under our energy efficiency funding whether a more efficient type of charging or an interactive type of charging would fall under those categories. But I will say we've run into headwind on that because chargers are just seen as new load, not efficiency.
Does anyone on this call have any off-grid solar chargers, or is that just something that people are thinking about implementing as an option? I'm just curious.
This is Zoe with DFW. From our perspective, we want to do both the battery storage and the solar powered chargers as we expand our electric fleet. The challenge right now is the economics of that initial capital investment. So if we can get some sort of rebate, or if there is some sort of incentive program through Encore, it'll just strengthen our case to push forward those programs. But right now, we have not implemented either one of those technologies yet.
Okay. We have about 3 minutes left, and I want to share with you guys one quick thing before we get off. But 1 second. And so basically, I know we've mentioned this a couple of times in some other presentations, but last year there was a funding opportunity announcement through the Department of Energy that basically was more so on community charging partner projects, and we are expecting that to drop again this year. And so we want to get this conversation started now before that drops, because anyone who has had experience within these not Freedom of Information Act, this is the morning, funding opportunity announcement, the FOA, as we call it, as soon as they drop that, they require proposals almost immediately within weeks. And so that doesn't really give a lot of time to kind of incubate ideas and create partnerships unless you already have that idea already started. And so this is something that we want to get into people's heads right now and get conversations moving about potential projects that we think we could utilize and use as a proposal within DFW. And so like here, like it says, you can demonstrate. You have to know that this is not a deployment. This is not a vehicle deployment type of project. This is more of like charging community partner projects. And so you can incorporate utilities, electric suppliers, community-based groups, local and regional governments, site hosts, dealerships, retailers, fleets, EVSE representatives, Clean Cities coalitions. That's obviously us. The 2020 awards were $4 to $6.9 million per project, 50% required match, and then 39 months to complete work for these projects. And so we are happy to lead this as the Clean Cities Coalition as the main applicant. However, from the match perspective, that would be a little difficult for us. We would definitely require project partners to be putting that match forward on our behalf. We'd be more of the facilitator to get this. But from this side, this is the list within the FOBA last year of projects that they put out there, but didn't limit the opportunity to, but it would be workplace charging infrastructure, electrification of on-road vehicles, ports, airports, including infrastructure, electrification of freight vehicles, multi-unit dwelling, curbside charging. These are all conversation topics that have come up within these conversations, as well as many private conversations. So we'll send this out as a follow-up, but we are encouraging everyone, if you have an idea or you have a want or need and you think that you would like to be included in those conversations of trying to create more of a community-based DFW, here's what we think, here's what we want to do from a larger regional scale, be part of that proposal, please reach out to us. We would love to get those conversations moving. So when that FOA actually drops, we are ready to go. From past experience, they really are only awarding people that have dedicated partners, not like ideas of partners. Like, we think we can get this many people from this good idea. They want concrete letters of support. We are engaged with this project if we get awarded, all this stuff. So the more concrete details, the more partners we have, the better it would showcase for this type of project. But that's kind of my last thing I wanted to, last thing I wanted to cover. It is past 10, so if anyone needs to hop off, that's definitely understandable. But going forward with this, I think that there could be a potential additional discussion, especially focusing on codes. And so we as the COG will work on trying to do a little bit more research on codes, trying to figure out what would be best for our region, and come up with some kind of template language that we think would work. And then if you guys think it would be a good idea, maybe set up another call to kind of go over that detail and see kind of what works or what you guys think we should shy away from or whatnot before we start engaging with that regional codes committee. Because kind of once we go there, we want to have a set. We discussed this with stakeholders. This is what they agree with. This is what we're proposing you to do. So we will go ahead and try to get that set up and keep you guys updated with that. But before we log off, is there any final closing thoughts that anyone wants to bring up for everyone?
I just had a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Where do we request information about the community-based proposal? This is Rock Robinson with ICARA.
Yeah, so you can definitely just from us or from the just general DOE for it.
You mentioned a minute ago that we needed to reach out immediately if we had ideas to support the project, and I just want to know.
Yeah, you can email Clean Cities at NCTCOG.org, and that's our general.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's our general Clean Cities email. All the Clean Cities staff have that, or you can email me or Lori, whoever on our kind of air quality Clean Cities team that you have connections for. We'll make sure it gets into the right hand. But we appreciate you guys getting on Friday morning. I know it was a lot of information being thrown at you, but like last time, we recorded this, we'll post it, and we'll send out some follow-ups and then set up some additional conversations and calls to get some other of this stuff moving. But with that, you guys all have a good rest of your day and a nice holiday weekend. Okay. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Bailey.